Hello, thank you for tuning in to our Safer Internet Day talk as we raise awareness around online safety. This year's theme for Safer Internet Day is Inspiring Change, Making a Difference, Managing Influence, and Navigating Change Online. In celebration of this, we're going to talk about whose responsibility is it to inspire change and make a difference? Is it the students, parents, teachers, or even the government? So today's session is a really special cross-border dialogue between Singapore and Canada, as we have an exciting lineup of expert panelists of cyber safety from public and private sectors. So let's meet our panelists. So first, let me introduce myself. I am Michelle Yao. I am the co-founder of Cyberlite, and I'll be the facilitator for today's session. I'll let each of the panelists give a self-introduction. So first up, we have Nina Bual from Singapore. Nina?
Hi, I'm Nina Boal. As Michelle said, we are co-founders. We co-founded Cyberlite, which works in cyber education and AI literacy for children from the ages 7 to 17 and enabling the educators and the parents to support them. We do this in 16 countries in Asia, and our footprint runs from India across back to Singapore. So I will hand over to Timothy.
And my name is Tim King, and I've been teaching in Ontario for just over 20 years. But before that, I worked in IT for a long time. So was one of the first people in Ontario to become a computer technician officially with my A+ certification. So, and that's a worldwide thing. So I think everyone's comfortable with that. Worked in IT for many years. And when I went into teaching, I started doing a lot of digital skilling in my classroom. So we got into Skills Canada, and there's World Skills too that's a part of. And especially IT and networking, we did well there. We were also really good at 3D animation, electronics, things like that. What happened in 2017, though, is I was sharing some statistics on all the jobs you can get if you're really digitally literate with my students, and I discovered the ICTC, the Information Communication Technology Council, was starting a new program called Cyber Titan. This works in collaboration with Cyber Patriot in the US, which is worldwide. I think there are countries all around the world doing it, as Cyber Centurion in the UK, for example. So Cyber Titan was getting launched. So I convinced 4 of my seniors to give it a try. I'd done a lot of IT, but no cybersecurity. So we were all learning as we went. And somehow we got ourselves into the national finals and ended up finishing 5th in Canada. Since then, some of those grads have gone on to post-secondary, and one of them is now at University of Waterloo here, just down the street from me, studying firmware systems for cyber. So it's been a fantastic experience. I've coached lots of teams through the competition. I'm a giant fan of trying to get students into competitions like that so that they can become aware of the field, because it tends to be quite secretive.
Thank you, Tim. That was a really lovely introduction to what's happening in Canada. So next up we have Sheena. Sheena, do you want to give a quick self-introduction, please?
Sure. So I'm Sheena Bolton. I'm the manager of K-12 Cyber Titan and Cyber Education Initiatives at ICTC. So Tim and I work together. I've been here just for 6 years now, and over that time, our K-12 has expanded quite significantly. We took a focus into cybersecurity and haven't really looked back yet. So we saw a need, and we have received some government funding for it. So it's been excellent for that. So we've slowly expanded cyber offerings, trying to get them across classrooms and in front of students across Canada. And then, as Tim mentioned, we have Cyber Titan, which is a Canada-wide cybersecurity competition, defending, not hacking, but defending. And yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Next, we have Claudio from KnowledgeFlow, who's also in Canada.
Oh, hi, I'm Claudio Popa. I am indeed from the KnowledgeFlow Cybersafety Foundation. We're super thrilled to be working with the ICTC to partner with Tim to collaborate with Cheryl and her husband. And thank you, Michelle and Nina, for setting this up. It's fantastic. I love being together with a bunch of big thinkers, and having been in IT for over 3 decades, there's a certain appreciation for eventually getting to do things top down instead of bottom up. And so a couple of decades ago, I got pulled, I think it's through my work with the Ontario Science Centre. I got pulled into starting to do cyber safety workshops for parents, for kids, for teachers, for law enforcement, as part of my organization. And after a while, after a few years of that, which tons of fun, lots of stuff for absolutely nothing, free resources, etc. Just spent all my evenings going from school to school. My accountant took me aside and said, "Hey, did you know that you might be breaching your fiduciary duty to the to the company?"
wow.
I said, "How so?" Well, you're delivering all this stuff for free, and you really should grow your company in addition to doing all this stuff. And so I was approached by a lovely lady, Paige Backman, who became my co-founder for the KnowledgeFlow Foundation. She said, "Oh yeah, well, I'm a lawyer and it's not a problem to incorporate a not-for-profit." And we never looked back. And now we have hundreds of courses online, again, available for free, lesson plans available for free, tip sheets, and so on. All of our partners and collaborators on this call know all about it here because they speak to our executive director and my wife, Deborah, who's totally on top of all these things. And it's been an awesome ride. She's doing an amazing job. And yeah, like I said, it's really about that top-down thinking, the fact that we need to change things at the top, change the tone at the top, change policy, encourage funding, etc., because the resources are there and there are tons of passionate people, as you can see from this call, and Cheryl is one of them.
Amazing. I think you really kind of pulled everything in what we're trying to achieve with this conversation today. You know, being able to speak from you guys in Canada as well as us in Singapore, sharing that perspective, as well as just having all these different types of profiles, right? We have people from the public sector, nonprofit, and then private sector as well. So speaking of private sector, the last but very not least person is Cheryl to introduce herself. Cheryl, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Cheryl Hayes. I'm one of the co-founders at Cyber Legends. I'm a tech entrepreneur, have been for a decade and a half, and we founded Cyber Legends in 2021 when COVID hit and kids went from an in-person learning environment to an online learning environment. Their exposure to threats and security issues was just growing exponentially, but there really wasn't a piece of or a solution there to help educate them. So we developed a game-based learning platform for K-8 to support not just educators in the classroom, but also a full cycle solution to support parents in the home as well, to keep that conversation going and help support online safety for kids.
Amazing. So thank you everyone for giving your introductions. I think this will be a really exciting chat. Let's get into it. Let's kick off the conversation with this question. What is the most critical role that educators and parents play in ensuring the cyber safety of children? And how do these roles differ or complement each other? I think from our experience, at least here in Singapore, there's always a little bit of a challenge where cyber safety is one that needs to be managed in the classroom as well as at home, but neither the educators or the parents really have a strong grasp on how to even manage these things of their children. So let's kick off, and I'll throw the question first to Tim. Tim, what do you think?
I would argue that if you're approaching this from a place of ignorance or fear, that children will gravitate to that. So it's actually worse if you come at it that way. If you try and throw a blanket on it and say, don't do that, you know what every kid is going to do. So, and this happened to me in class as well, because early on in this, we would get into situations where we were building networks and trying to hack things and everything else. And if I banned certain things, everybody doubled down on it. They're teenagers. So my approach was always just radical transparency with it. And I feel like if parents and educators, they don't all need to be experts, but if they can all come at this from the same place of honesty and say, maybe if I don't know, I'm going to reach out and find, and there are a lot of people here who can provide resources, find those resources and engage with them, we can actually make this work. There's an assumption that one of the terms I heard when I first started teaching was a digital native. Like anybody who was born when computers existed magically knows everything about the internet. This is patently untrue. Some of the most astonishing things I've ever seen have come from digital natives. So it's a job we need to do. We can't just assume it's happening.
Yeah, and I think you've raised some really good points there. First of all, Nina and I went around South Asia last year conducting our cyber safety workshops on the ground. We've been to a couple of schools where they banned ChatGPT completely, right? Because everyone was freaking out about it. And then when we went to ask the students themselves, they were like, I think 99% of students said they were using it for schoolwork. And it just shows that completely banning technology is actually worse for the kids, because you end up not giving them the right skills to learn how to use different tools and be safe. So Cheryl, how do you feel about the role between educators and parents?
Well, I think, unfortunately, it's similar to what Tim mentioned, is that there is a knowledge gap, I think, when it comes to having conversations about cyber safety. And what ends up happening is, parents and educators, even businesses, tend to, stick their heads in the sand and kind of pretend that the issues aren't happening. And I think the most critical role that any adult can play in ensuring the cyber safety education for children is to just start having open conversations. You don't need to have the right answers, but we all need to talk about it. And through the conversations, I think everybody will just start to feel more comfortable and not feel like they need to shy away from talking about concerns or even skills, knowledge gap, whatever. It just starts that flow and takes the pain away.
Yeah. And so what about you, Claudio? I know that you mentioned that you are on the ground a lot and you conduct workshops and give these resources for free. How do you think, in terms of educators and parents, how can they leverage on these resources or close that knowledge gap, as Cheryl was saying?
So the key word for me is questions. Always keep asking questions. So what I do with my kids, what I do with kids, with other people's kids, when I walk into a classroom, is I start asking questions, and they love that. The kids in schools love that because, well, for other reasons that we'll discuss later, but it has to do with the fact that I empower them using pseudonyms, using nicknames, and they love to be superheroes or whatnot. And so they kind of hide behind a mask, even though they're fully visible. And so they can be open, transparent, and genuine. With my own kids, I literally walk them through a bit of a mental checklist that they themselves have built up. So I ask them, what kind of questions do you ask? Or if I hear that there's a new tool in their classroom, I say, what kind of questions did you ask? For example, they might come home and say, our teacher gave us this password so we can log in. And what question did you ask then? When you were given a password instead of having had the opportunity to select one yourself? What questions did you ask about where the privacy policy might be if it's not in the footer of that website, and so on and so forth? So thinking about questions is a good thing to teach kids in general, to be skeptical, to be open-minded, to understand more, but also in order to ensure their own cyber safety and, of course, that of their immediate network.
Absolutely. I love this this kind of advice and training the critical thinking skills to start asking questions. I'm going to ask Sheena as well, sitting in, cyber education within ICTC, how have you kind of looked at this question in particular between educators and parents?
Yeah, I really think it's the responsibility of everyone. As everything is technology based, the more we go forward, everyone has to have some kind of knowledge about that, what you're presenting online, even before that, like what you're being exposed to just in general. One thing that we did do this year at ICTC through KnowledgeFlow is create a Cyberbites program for educators, because we find you're presenting to them and there's already a barrier because, like we mentioned, it's scary, it's different, they don't really know, they're not comfortable. So we created a basic program through KnowledgeFlow that gives them the terminology and just a comfort to start having those conversations. And I think that is one thing that it's just the beginning, and it's the way to integrate it slowly.
Amazing. So actually moving on from this particular question, let's look at what the risks are that children face online today, and how should parents and educators adapt their strategies to address these evolving threats. So I'm going to start off with Nina, because I know that she has 3 kids. So Nina, what do you feel?
So from having 3 children and also working with children across the board, the threat really comes, or the risk really comes from that we're allowing anyone and everyone to access our children's mindshare. So the way I describe it to people who may have not started thinking or understanding critically how to deal with their children's cyberspaces, imagine that you've put your child into a room and then you've just allowed anybody to walk into it from the window, from the door, and you've not created any nuts, bolts, any security around it. Would you actually be okay with them being in that room? And obviously the parents' response is no, because they can physically, emotively see what that would look like. And then I say, look, but when you're actually putting them into their cyber rooms or into their cyber worlds, what locks, bolts have you put in there? And are you aware of who's coming in and having the conversation? So the risk comes with those people who are having the conversations. So those are the people, the technology providers that we allow to send our children notifications and convince them to be on the platform for 3-4 hours, causing habit behavior, screen time, which I know most parents grapple with on a day-to-day basis. Let's be fair, we need the screen time to stay sane, but we also want to ensure that, we're not giving them too much screen time. And then the risks of other people who are motivated to come into our children's spaces for bad motivations, to access them for phishing, misinformation, fanatical thinking. We've seen a lot of that happening. And then at the end, and concerningly, is stranger danger, paedophiles and grooming. But actually all of it is allowed into our children's spaces. And the risk is that we're not having a conversation with our children in educational environments where they know it is as important as those conversations we were having when I was a child about talking to strangers, etc. I mean, that's been an evolving conversation. Well, we haven't even started this conversation. And what confuses me is when I go to many developed curriculums. I mean, we work in 16 countries, only 2 of them have an education system that actually supports time and budget in the cyber agenda. So it's a case of, if we don't deal with it at an educational level, parents, we've grown up not knowing what we're doing. We're all sort of Googling it, let's be fair. And then the private sector have their own motivation. It goes back to this whole thing. Our children are incredibly at risk from all those situations. I've painted a really dark picture, but there's a lot of risk out there for them.
Yeah, and there are a lot of kind of conversations around what parents are doing. There's a lot of people Googling it, and we find that it's really the people who are not Googling it that is the problem that we have to look out for. But speaking of this, how do you think the cyber safety education system is integrated and approached within the Canadian system? Because we've talked about, as Nina mentioned, education playing a really big part in this. So I'm going to start off first with Tim. How do you feel coming from the Canadian perspective?
Well, the easy answer is it isn't. What's happened in Canada is there's been a education didn't leap into educational technology, but it's kind of seeped into classrooms. And we've gotten to the point, especially after the pandemic, where the expectation is that you always have access to technology, you're always leaning on it. An example is the teachers used to have photocopying budgets, and they're all gone now. So there's nothing on paper anymore. A good example, my wife's senior English classes is high school graduates. She said, I need to get the Chromebooks every day in here if we're going to do writing. And the principal couldn't understand it. And she said, well, why don't you just get them to handwrite? And it's because they can't. They can't handwrite because basically they've lost that ability, but they can keyboard poorly. So that's where we're at. If we're going to integrate these skills, then I think we need to teach the tech. We've never done that, but it's seeped in and now it's here. So Ontario just finally mentioned cybersecurity in the curriculum this year, but it's not really about cybersecurity at all. If you read the fine print, it's basically like your personal data is the fixation in the curriculum. It was like it was written by somebody with no background in cybersecurity. So,
Yeah, and what we find a lot of times is, at least the stuff that we've come across here in Singapore, is that these materials tend to be written by someone who is an expert in security, but not necessarily in education or creating such material. So there's a huge disconnect between the language that's used, the way that we teach it downwards to children. So Cheryl, you have a really interesting company that you make cyber safety games for kids to learn about these. How do you feel about the current kind of education in Canada?
So we have game-based learning, but we've also created fully fleshed out teaching resources to be used in the classroom. And we also develop professional development videos for teachers to help them upskill. And the reason why we did that, especially the professional development, is because of what Tim mentioned. So Ontario did finally include digital media literacy in the new language curriculum. So that's really fantastic. Really happy to see that. However, they released the curriculum in June of 2023 for it to be taught in or integrated in September, and didn't, create a timeline or a pathway to help upskill teachers or even provide resources to help them go and implement these lessons in the classroom. So unfortunately, it's great that it's in the curriculum, but if the government isn't taking it seriously, then how are teachers and educators supposed to as well? And so that is the unfortunate piece. Yes, great to see it in there. And we do see it in the health and phys ed curriculums across the country. It's sort of like a checkbox if you get to it.
Right. And in Canada, does it kind of happen state by state or region by region, or it's more of a kind of nationwide approach?
It's provincial, so education is provincial. Yeah. And so that's why Ontario is leading the way, in the sense that they've now said that digital literacy is tied to literacy. However, importance isn't placed there.
Yeah,
sure. I can expand on that a little bit too, I think. So New Brunswick is another province that has been pretty forefront of bringing in cyber. It's still not in the curriculum per se, but it is used quite a bit. So they're one of our biggest Cyber Titan teams. It's the education system will actually fund some of the teams, which is great. But the other thing is we have been through ICTC, we've been funded federally. And our main overall funding is for a coding program in general, but they saw the niche that we are cybersecurity and we are digital skills, and they have allowed us to be funded 3 times over with the focus on cyber. So I think as much as there is still a lot to do, it is slowly being seen. And I personally hope and think that maybe we're there, and we're hopefully coming more and more to actual cybersecurity funding for across Canada. Fingers crossed. Might be that's my hope. And
I mean, it is the first step that's the most important.
Exactly.
Right? Getting the government to recognize that this is something that we need to kind of open the conversation up to kind of keep developing as as technology is developing very quickly. So Nina, do you want to share a bit about how Singapore education is viewed and implemented in Singapore? Like, what are the unique approaches? And we've seen a couple of really successful ways that that educational methods are being used here.
Yeah, Singapore, I would say, is ahead of the game from all the countries that we work with. And the big thing that makes that so is there is budget behind it and there is time within the classroom. So the curriculum has been designed by the Ministry of Education to go year by year and sort of block up for the children. All the way up to 2030 is already outlined with AI literacy already in there as well. So it's a component that's expected as part of the digital defense of Singapore. They see it as frontline, as sending their boys to national service. So it is front and center. So it's a model that me and Michelle sort of lean on to show how you can have success if you start children very young. And it starts here as young as the age of 5 years old, we start going into classrooms, and it will go all the way up to 17. And there's two ways that they do this. They design curriculum and time in the calendar for teachers and professional development for the teachers themselves. And then they do programs that are part of their after school club. One of the things that I've enjoyed seeing them implement is like you have a school captain in your class or a prefect, depending on what sort of language you use. In Singapore as well, you have a cyber ambassador, which it clearly acknowledges that actually the teacher may not be allowed into a child space and should not be allowed into a child space as an adult, but the children themselves can have a peer-to-peer approach of supporting each other in that. And one of the things that the ministry and what happens in Singapore is they do enable people like Cyberlite to come in and offer our expertise, our curriculum, to sort of engage and to top up what they have done here. So I think those are key components. In environments where we've not seen this play out very well, we've seen developing countries where there's an eagerness and there's a need. The teachers and the principals are saying 20% of my time is about cyberbullying or misinformation or an actual critical thing that has something to do with cyber awareness. But where's the time? Where's the budget? How are we supposed to do that? And I think from what I hear that you also have a lot of your resources for free. And that's because we desire to make an impact while we try and push from the top. And as Claudia said, pushing from the top is so important, because unless we have the policy, unless we have the time, unless we have the buy-in from the top, we are sort of paddling and supporting one child at a time when we need to be supporting the infrastructure. And I think Singapore is a great learning. And I say that as not as a Singaporean, so I'm not being patriarchal. Michelle's not allowed to say it. But, they've done an incredible job over here. And I feel like we can really learn from what they've done. Another one in Asia that I would ask anybody who's tuning into this to understand how they've done it well is Australia. They have really doubled down to ensure that cyber safety is baked into their curriculum very young.
Yeah, I think
Certainly
Australia...
something to be proud of. Sorry.
Yeah. And Australia is a really great example of another example of the government leading the way and then everyone else kind of being supported and following suit. So the next question is something I'm very excited to get everyone's viewpoints on, because this is very relevant. Just a couple of days ago, we know that there's a huge hearing in America about child online safety, where all the big tech companies and social media companies have been called into Congress to speak about this. So I would love to hear everyone's views on this personally as well. How can technology be leveraged more effectively to protect children? Let's start with you, Claudio. How do you feel about this?
So for me, it's about empowerment and it's about recognizing that you've got scarcity of resources and you need to take it top down and go as broad as possible, but you also have to do this peer-to-peer approach, like Nina was saying. For example, when we have our this awesome unhackable program where we go into schools and we have these cyber safety ambassadors, and we have these little cells where the kids bring in their friends and they can all be part of a web of trust, and they can all be cyber safety champions. The idea is not just to share or force information into people. It's to make it cool. It's to empower people to feel like they have been augmented with additional skills. And of course, for us, it always starts with fun. So during the previous two questions, I saw a common thread in what all of you, my colleagues and experts, are saying. And that common thread is the common language that we need to use. And that common language is, I think, what's the challenge in many cases, because we have a bunch of provinces, we have a whole bunch of school districts, everybody is excited to educate kids, everybody's starting from a different perspective and viewpoint and so on, and they end up using different words, or they use words that dilute things too much. Hey, do you want to learn about cybersecurity? Well, that's a pretty big space. So we start by empowering kids with tiny things, like we even start them with Google's Interland program, where they go in and they start slaying things or grabbing little hearts and so on. And that's the tiniest unit of impact that you can have. And you build on that impact, and you can say, well, what I say to the kids when I'm in their classroom is, what are you going to go home and teach your parents about? And you can see their minds opening about, what I'm teaching my parents? Yeah, well, of course you're teaching your parents. I'm teaching you stuff that they don't know. Wow. So they go home and they feel empowered, and I get calls from parents saying, guess what my kid taught me today? You know what? They told me that I can put spaces inside passwords. What? So there you go.
Mind-blowing. Yeah, and I love that. I think what you're really kind of building on top is the cyber hygiene of children and families. And it's something that Nina and I always talk about, where the child is teaching upwards. Here especially, we have a lot of issues with our senior citizens who apparently fall for a lot of scams. I'm sure it happens worldwide. And so we tell the kids, go home and tell your grandparents about this. Tell them not to click on different links or send false news or misinformation around to everyone. Tim, I would love to hear about your perspective on how technology can be leveraged more effectively in this particular instance, and if there's any specific tools or practices that you recommend.
I think if you make a comparison to literacy, it makes great parallels. If somebody's illiterate, you can have a library full of information and it's meaningless to them. They would just throw in a fire and get warm from it. But it could teach them so much more. I feel like technology is that amplified. So just like literacy, if you're technically skilled, you can learn things yourself. It can empower your learning. One of my great frustrations is the way e-learning has been rolled out in Canada. Basically, people have taken paper handouts, turned them into PDFs, turned them into web pages, and called it e-learning. And it kind of breaks my heart. You've got an interactive digital medium here that could just be so powerful and so differentiated and individual for every kid. If we did e-learning well, we would enable kids, and it goes back to what Claudio said as well, the idea that if the kid feels empowered, there's not going to be as many instances of abuse. And that goes for any population that is feeling that could be abused. The benefit here is if you empower them and give them this literacy, that they can step up and look after themselves and look after each other too. So for me, it all comes back to literacy, and you can call it technical literacy or digital literacy if you want, but I think it is just literacy at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that analogy of kind of having an illiterate person in a library doesn't help them learn more things. I'll open it up to the room as well. If
and we
Sheena,
shouldn't stay
Cheryl,
away. Sorry to interrupt, Michelle. We shouldn't stay away from the converse or the opposite of literacy either, because we need to recognize when digital illiteracy rears its ugly head, and you see poor policy, poor educational policy, and the adoption of terrible technologies and general banalities that that typically accompany the type of rhetoric. So we always talk about the good, but I find that kids also learn when you provide contrast, when you provide, you know, what's the opposite of something. And again, that goes towards that common language that we like to strive for. Sorry, Michelle, you were just opening it up to the
room,
panel.
if anyone, no
So I
problem.
guess
If
the
anyone
other
else wants to join.
Yeah, so the other thing I think too is accessibility. So even over the last 6 years, we used to have to go into a school, have the tech teacher download an image, etc. We have now moved browser-based, cloud-based, and that has been huge in being able to get into classrooms, get into wherever, not even classrooms, into libraries, and have it more easily, readily for the kids to get to. So browser-based has been huge, still keeping it safe. But then using the VPNs, we have a partnership with Field Effect, which is a great cyber range technology that is all browser based. So that's been huge in Canada because we're so wide, and you still need Wi-Fi, you still need like computers and technology, but it's one barrier down, like it's one step forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. In Asia, especially in our neighboring developing countries, we see a lot of children have access to smartphones, but not necessarily like laptops or desktops. But then, you know, a lot of these kind of more educational resources are just designed for the laptop experience. And so, you know, thinking about accessibility in that way, where their Wi-Fi might be slow on their phones, but they still need to learn. So how can we do like more of a mobile first approach to learning for these children? Nina, Cheryl, do you have any thoughts you want to add into this?
Yeah, just on a different perspective about how technology can be leveraged to protect the children themselves. A lot of technology at the moment doesn't have safety baked in. You need to go and turn on your safety settings, which is a minefield, especially if you have more than one child. You could be there for hours. And that's got to be simplified, and it's got to be more intuitive to be able to use technology. In my world, every app should be set up for a child, and an adult should go away and then set it up for an adult if they're both on the same system. So I think technology needs to think about the human design and how it actually interacts with our children. And then technology companies have to not just create the feature, and we've seen a lot of that hands in the air. We've done parent controls, nobody uses it. There needs to be not just a push mechanism, they need to pull parents in and bring them on the journey. And a lot of that is technology companies have to accept that there are risk-taking behaviors on their platforms and have that conversation openly. And, you know, engaging with people like ourselves to say, look, we want to be part of the solution as well, and not just be like, well, we've tried our best, which we know that we could all just be doing a bit better by human design.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great opening point. I would love to kind of throw that to Cheryl as well, because you are the designer of such technology, and I would assume you design and think about how children and parents interact with your game.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're I think, you know, not naive to the fact that you can put parental controls on your kid's device, but you know, the kid that they sit next to you on the bus has free reign. So I think one thing that we really believe strongly about is just that technology should be treated with respect. On all sides of the coin. We're so quick to hand out a device to a kid and just say, go nuts, you know, play on YouTube, go find your way around, or put parental controls on there thinking that they can't get past it. But I think what we need to do is go back to the basics and think about when we were kids, and, you know, you look both, I mean, today still, you look both ways before you cross the street. If someone offers you candy, like you say no and you run, like, or you tell a trusted adult. These are all basic things that we seem to have forgotten about when we give a piece of technology to a child. So it would be amazing if, you know, we could develop something that's like a driver's license for technology for kids. You know, you pass this level, you get access to this. And then that way it's, yeah, you're forcing people to learn, but
You're
at this
also
point.
assessing them, right? You're assessing whether they've learned the knowledge or not. I love this analogy of like road safety to cyber safety. We hear it a lot, and especially like the analogy of the seatbelt. You know, wearing a seatbelt is something that our parents or their parents' generation had to be taught, and now it's just ingrained in everyone's behaviors. One that I also heard the other day is where people outside of cybersecurity view cybersecurity as kind of something that slows them down, right? Especially when you're building new technology or, you know, building a new tech startup. They kind of view cybersecurity as something that is just an extra kind of thing that they have to do. But actually what cybersecurity and kind of cyber safety education does is it's supposed to speed you up, right? It's like putting brakes in the car wasn't meant to slow cars down. It actually made it safer for them to speed up. And I think, you know, there's a lot of comparisons over the past a few decades where technology has come into our way of life, and it just needs to be ingrained how we be safe with new things that come in, new innovations.
A couple of thoughts on that point, which is extremely sharp. I really liked it. One is the notion that you're speeding things up if you're doing things right. The idea that I try to impart, and I think you'll agree, is to systematize things. If you systematize things, it becomes second nature. If you systematize things, you make fewer mistakes. If you systematize things, you have a process and you learn to think in a programmatic way. And that's great, and it does speed you up. Secondly, there's often nothing wrong with slowing down a little bit and taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, is this clickbait? Could it be a fish? Might they be incentivized to ask me that question? Or maybe that yes button is twice as large as the no button for a reason. Am I being influenced? And so part of what I do when I teach is I like to look at what's called dark pattern techniques. And these dark patterns are ways to influence people using design, using UX. And interestingly, another and my third and final point, I don't want to monopolize the stage here. My third and final point is that one of the things that I always start my classes with, whether I'm teaching at university or college or little kids, I challenge the audience to say, what is the enemy of security? And they very rarely think along those lines. Although as soon as I say the word convenience, they get it. Convenience is the enemy of security. You're always trying to skip steps, and skipping steps is not the same thing as systematizing. So teaching them these two alternatives and suddenly opening their mind to the fact that, hey, you know what, the easier you try to make it for yourself, perhaps the less secure something becomes, will bring that critical thinking that you were alluding to earlier to not just cyber safety, but other aspects of their lives.
Yeah, and this is something that we also teach is getting the students to challenge or getting them to think about what is the motivation behind every experience that they come across, right? What was the motivation of that piece of fake news coming and landing into your social media feed? Or what was the motivation of just having the accept all button when you have the cookie pop up, right? And I think that is a really great kind of way to tie things up is the idea of convenience. And I love that. I haven't heard that before, but I think it's just spot on, hits the nail on the head. And so, oh, sorry. There was the last thing is could you share some practical tips for parents to keep their children safe online, especially those, as we have established today, might not be that technically savvy? So I'll start with Nina first, and then we'll open it up as well.
Okay, it's a really cheesy line that Michelle absolutely loves, but a family that scrolls together stays together. If you disengage from your children's space, you've left them alone and you've let them at risk, but they love it as well. My son will love if I just watch him play Minecraft, and wants to tell me what he's done and how he's utilized things. And that experience is very incredible and important to him. Little does he know is I'm just checking his settings out. But you need to be there. I need to be in my children's space as they adapt to social media as 13-year-old girls. Like, what is their AI doing? What is it pumping out to them? And then what I do is I subscribe to all the channels I feel are appropriate and take control of their AI as well. So remember, you can have an influence on their actual landscape if you're there, if you're part of it.
Yeah. What about you, Claudia? I know you mentioned you have kids. What other advice would you share to other parents?
I do everything in threes. So my 3 tips here, very quickly. And this is a follow-up from the previous question. I try to get kids, or literally anybody else, my mother, to identify key indicators of scams or disinformation or any sort of negative influence. And the first thing that I ask them for is, does it sound urgent? Because if there's urgency, you need to then take a step back, slow things down, and think practically, am I being deceived? The second thing is FUD. As I said, kids love fancy expressions. I like to make them all say cyber situational awareness. They get a kick out of that. And then we talk about FUD, and identifying fear, uncertainty, and doubt is something trying to scare you into believing that unless you do this, something will happen. Well, maybe you should then take a step back and point to it. And that's the kind of chats that we have around the dinner table when they've identified something that uses fear to make a decision. And finally, I as I alluded to earlier, the things that really kickstart discussions with young people, in particular in school settings, are the idea of taking on a nickname or becoming a superhero. Or I literally will just say, what's your favorite superhero? Okay, you're it for the next hour or so. And so for Safer Internet Day, I think for this year, my theme is pseudonymity. That's another one of those cool words that they learn to pronounce, and it sounds like a tongue twister, and they go home and they say, hey, guess what? They challenge their parents to tell them what pseudonymity is. That's what we need to teach kids. When I teach my kids to set up an account, because sometimes they get a new device and they go online immediately because they want to play. And so this week we got this VR headset, and they go online and they create an account. And I say, well, don't use your regular account, create a brand new account, and make sure it's not just the password that needs to be different, it's the account name or email address that needs to be different as well. Oh, do I need to go and create another email on Gmail or what have you? No, you can use plus notation because it's free and it comes with every Gmail account, and all your accounts can be different. So if there's a breach, you'll know which company lost your information or your identity, and you can go after them and you can learn something new about, I don't know, filing a complaint or a privacy question or whatnot. So pseudonymity is my big tip for parents and educators.
I mean, those are some amazing tips. Does anyone else have any great practical tips? What about you, Sheena? Anything for kind of just parents, educators, adults in general as well? They don't really have to have children to need to learn some of these things.
I think just everyone to realize that we no one knows everything about it. It is an ever-changing landscape. Trying to keep yourself as educated as possible through legit resources. Like we mentioned, the fake news. So trying to even just be able to pinpoint that and move away from that yourself. By you talking about that, everyone around you, children, family, will also impart into that.
How about you, Tim? Any practical tips that we can offer?
To boil it down really simply, especially if I'm dealing with people who aren't technically literate, the phrase is always, does it sound too good to be true?
Yes.
Because if it's too good to be true, it is. So you need to be really careful when something like that comes across. In our school, they banned all of the Instagram and everything, and all the students lost their minds. And the next day, everybody was showing me how they'd found free VPNs from Belarus. And I'm like, do you think the Belarusians are giving you free VPNs? Do you think they're just taking all that bandwidth for you as a gift? Where do you think your data is going when that's happening? You know, but that mechanism, and Claudio rotated around this too. But that idea of if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. If we just looked at things online that way, every news article that just happens to agree with your most crazy theories about the world, that's not a coincidence. That's somebody giving you just what they think you want. If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
That's
Yeah.
excellent. There's a difference between not trusting versus forgetting to question. So make sure that you question things. It doesn't mean you don't have to trust anything. It just means you need to remember to question things before you trust them. So that's excellent, Tim.
I just wanted to say exactly, Sheena was completely right that we don't all know everything. We're a set of domain experts, as it were. And even from this 45-minute call, I've been like, wow, actually, that's a valid point I've not considered myself. So it's a continuing learning curve on this journey because it's ever evolving.
Yeah.
I think my magic power is I can jump in and I get a real charge out of, wow, I didn't know that. So for me, that just makes me want to go like this as, oh, I got into the quantum thing and everything. Also, that idea of like it being, don't be afraid of it, like just jump in and you know, you can figure it out.
Yeah. Cheryl, any last practical tips or advice we can offer to anyone watching?
Yeah, I mean, my tip would be that kids are really impressionable. And, you know, if they see a parent or an adult or even their older sister or brother on their phones scrolling for hours upon hours or liking or messaging, they're going to copy and they're just going to do what you do. So I think just be mindful of those practices and know that, you know, kids are always watching and they are very impressionable.
Adults are too.
You're right.
It's true.
Yeah,
So true.
Okay, so do we have any questions from the community or any other kind of discussion points that we'd like to just talk about while we have a bunch of really great kind of cybersecurity, cyber safety experts in the room?
We always get asked the question, and it came through, and I just love to see how other domain experts answer it. What is the best amount of screen time for my child? Is like the #1 question we get asked, and we all have different ways of answering it. So I'd love to hear how you guys answer it.
I think personally, so I have a couple stepkids, and we noticed that one was more emotional when the phone was in his room or different things. So feeding off the child emotionally, what that is. So like maybe your one child is able to be on technology longer and it doesn't have the same effect, and maybe one needs to have a disconnect. And we found sleeping was much better and energy and mood was much better if the phone was not in the bedroom at night. So it stays downstairs and it does not, for
I
example.
love that. I think it also kind of ties into this idea of age online, where children of the same ages are kind of treated the same online. Like we would take the 13-year-old kind of restriction the same way, but you have a child who's both 13, who one might be more emotionally prepared for social media, for interacting with people in online games, while another could be, you know, kind of more sensitive to different things, or just not have the right skills to be able to be in these spaces. So I love, the idea of feeding off your children emotionally and tapping into that. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this very kind of, I would say, quite a controversial question about screen time? It always baffles us how we actually answer this.
Well, it's about the way you formulate the question as well, and we always see it formulated the same way. There's got to be a maximum amount of screen time, but the way I look at it, and many other parents do, is what are they doing while they're looking at a screen? Are they being completely passive? Are they being taken advantage of? Are they being just playing some mindless thing that is just hugely repetitive? Or perhaps it's up to parents to develop a particular super skill when it comes to recognizing a certain level of maturity in kids. Because what I've noticed with my kids is that they've started recognizing when they themselves have had enough. And that's a level of maturity that's quite fascinating, because I see them just disconnecting by themselves. And they're saying, you know what, I used this thing for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. That's enough. I'll put it away. I'll pick up a book. Wow, that is a certain level of digital maturity. And certainly the converse of that is recognizing when a kid might have had enough, when they become temperamental, for example, when you say, hey, maybe you should take a break, and they are less tolerant or patient towards you. And that's when you know they've had enough. And you try to gently separate them from the device. So it really is about what it is that they're doing, and being aware that at some particular point in time, they themselves will develop a self, what's the word? A self-assessment that allows them to say, okay, well, I'm ticking off all these boxes. I think I'm done for now.
Yeah.
I'll go away and do something
I'm very
else.
jealous that happens in your house. I have a quick tactic of, if I open the fridge, they all look up.
That works with my dog.
Yeah.
But I'm also lucky that that I've got 4 kids, and so we have a wide variety of digital behaviors. As you know, when you have multiple kids, they instinctively develop different characters.
Yes,
And so while one might have more control over their own use of digital media, another might be completely subjugated to some mindless game. So it's interesting to see the contrast and learn from it as a parent.
I teach computer tech, and I actually have struggled with my secondment because there is so much screen time. And you would think, well, you teach computers, aren't you on the screen all the time? And I'm not. We're building computers or building networks. It's all mechanical, hands-on stuff, and I'm moving around all the time. So the idea of like sitting in the office here with this fantastic screen setup I've got is nice, but I know when I've reached a limit. And for me, there's like a tail off in quality of work. And when I get to that point, I'm very aware of that point. And I think even gamers could know that too. Any gamer who says I can do an 8-hour marathon and I'm as good in hour 6 as I am in hour 1 is not a good gamer, probably. But you know what I mean? There's like a peak performance piece there. And if we started approaching screen time that way, I think maybe that would be the reflex we could use to say, hey, I'm just not very good anymore. Need a break.
I think what I'm hearing is that there's two ways that we approach screen time. Right? There's the active way where you are gaming and you're using your kind of brain a lot, and it also works in when you're doing homework or when you're doing research, and there is that point where you're like, okay, I'm exhausted, I've used my brain too much, I need to get away. And then there's, I think what Claudia was saying, is passive screen time, where you're mindlessly clicking, your brain's not actually kind of thinking through what it's doing. We see this a lot with kids on YouTube as well, where they're just like endlessly watching it on autoplay, and then when you try and take the iPad away, it is a kind of very loud screeching noise that comes out of them. So thank you as we wrap up, I want to say thank you very much to everyone who's here today. Thank you for spending your day with us, celebrating Safer Internet Day. I loved talking to all you domain experts in the room, because I think it's very rare that we get a chance to really talk about cyber safety education in particular, and how, you know, parents and educators can really start to come in and join into this conversation. So I'm gonna pass kind of the baton around the room, pass the mic. If everyone could just tell the viewers where they might find more updates about your great work. If you want to drop a social media handle or a website, please feel free to do so. I'll start with Cheryl, and then we'll go around.
Yeah, the best place to find us would be on our website at cyberlegends.com. You can take a look around. We've got examples of resources. You can see a little video of our game. And another great thing to do would be to subscribe to our newsletter and stay up to date on some updates that we have coming out, and some great tips and blog posts as well. So
Great.
it's cyberlegends.com.
Awesome. What about Tim or Sheena? Do you want to tell people how they can learn more about Cyber Titans and the work that you're doing?
So cybertitan.ca is probably the easiest place to go. If you want to go the longer route, you can do ICTC-CTIC.ca, which everyone has already forgotten. So cybertitan.ca.
Awesome.
Or
And
eTalent. You could always jump on eTalent Canada and just go check out some of the options on there. ICTC does adult retraining too, so there you'll see a wide range of resources on there.
oh, that's good to know. And Claudio?
Very easy, knowledgeflow.ca or cybersafetyfoundation.org. That's always a favorite of mine. There are tons of lesson plans for teachers. There are courses for students. There are tip sheets for all kinds of sectors of society. And it's a whole bunch of free stuff. And if any one of you ends up on the site, please do take some courses. I'd love to have some feedback. I want to know how we can keep on improving it, because we're trying to improve everything all the time, and feedback matters. So it's been awesome spending this this hour with all of you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great, and happy Safer Internet Day 2024.
Thank you. I'm just going to pass it to Nina very quickly to share our links.
Yeah, you can go onto cyberlite.org, where we have a range of lesson plans for cyber safety and now AI literacy. We have a great Microsoft challenge on there as well for schools to participate in, to understand how to bring generative AI into the classroom safely and responsibly. I guess that's a whole new webinar that we could do. But you can go over there and see what we're up to.
I look forward to it.
Great.
Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
That's great.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.